Welcome to another installment of our daily devotionals. We want to continue today to think about the subject of prayer. We talked about prayer as a posture, that God expects us to bend the knee, to kneel, to bow down before Him as we recognize who He is and we're coming before His throne. Prayer is a petition. That is, we're asking God for His help, His divine guidance and intervention in our lives. And so that petition shows the progressive intensity of asking and it's given, seeking and it's found, knocking and the door will be opened. So we see that progression as we continue to intensify our petitions before God. Prayer also is about patience. It builds a character in us that allows us to trust God in every situation. When we talk about patience, we're not always thrilled with the process of patience development, but understand that prayer is a character building, and its desire is to help us to accomplish a patience that waits on God for His will. Prayer is not magic, it's not a shortcut, it's not a cop-out, and it's not a manipulation. We don't strong-arm God and say, well, God, I asked you, so now you have to give it to me. God is never under our whim or under our control. God is the sovereign God of all the universe. He is Jehovah. He is the maker, the creator, the God, the Lord. Have you ever heard the phrase unanswered prayers? A few years ago, country singer Garth Brooks had a popular song, and I really enjoyed the song, even though I disagree theologically, but the song was called Unanswered Prayers, and it has a nice message to it. But God actually answers all of our prayers. There are only unprayed prayers. There are no unanswered prayers. But how does God answer our prayers? That's the real question. At times, God says yes. When Hannah prayed for a son in 1 Samuel chapter 1, God said yes, and He gave Hannah that son. In Isaiah 32, King Hezekiah prayed for a longer life, and God said yes. He granted him a longer life. Even though we might read about Hezekiah and wonder if he used those extra years to their greatest advantage, God said yes. But at times God says no. When Jesus prayed in the Garden of Gethsemane not to go to the cross, of course God said no. The divine purpose, the divine plan required the cross. Jesus had to go, taking our place, suffering our punishment, and Jesus died on the cross. And so the cup that He prayed that would be taken away, but He said, nevertheless, not my will, but your will be done. Jesus was accepting of God's will, and even with the no. The Apostle Paul in 2 Corinthians chapter 12 prayed for a thorn in the flesh to be removed. Listen to how he describes it in 2 Corinthians 12, beginning of verse 7. And lest I should be exalted above measure by the abundance of the revelations, a thorn in the flesh was given to me, a messenger of Satan to buffet me, lest I should be exalted above measure. Concerning this thing, I pleaded with the Lord 3 times that it might depart from me. And He said to me, my grace is sufficient for you, for my strength is made perfect in weakness. Therefore, most gladly I will rather boast in my infirmities, that the power of Christ may rest upon me. Therefore, I take pleasure in infirmities, in reproaches, in needs, in persecutions, in distresses, for Christ's sake. For when I am weak, then I am strong. We see that God told Paul no as far as removing the messenger of Satan, the thorn in the flesh, but Paul accepted that. And he said, if that allows God to be glorified, I'll accept that. Sometimes God also says, wait. Elizabeth and Zacharias had never had a child, and they prayed for a child. Finally, Elizabeth is told that she will have a child. When Zacharias is told that she is with child, Zacharias doesn't accept it. He doesn't really believe. And so God closes his mouth. He's mute for the time of Elizabeth's pregnancy. Someone has said the mouth that will not shout will be shut. Zacharias learned that lesson for 9 long months until finally, after John was born, then finally Zacharias could speak again, and he gives all the praise, he magnifies God, and he learns patience. Sometimes God may substitute the prayer that we've asked. He may know that we need something better, and so he gives us something different. He substitutes one request for a better answer. Sometimes God answers by saying there needs to be a change. Paul's plans in the book of Acts to be evangelistic, to take the gospel to various places, the Holy Spirit stopped him and would not let him go to certain places at certain times. Those plans Paul continued to accept. Paul continued to make plans to spread the gospel where he could, and when God said no, he waited. He let that be a change in his mind, in his own personal plans to fit God's plans. Job wanted to have an immediate relief from the suffering, the physical trials that he endured. And yet God taught him that Job needed to change his mind, his understanding. He needed to be patient. He needed to learn God. In Job 42, one of the things that Job acknowledges there in Job 42 verse 2, I know you can do everything, and that no purpose of yours can be withheld from you. And then Job goes on, he says, I had heard of you by the ear, but now I can see you. So Job had learned there, developed, his faith had grown. Patience had had its perfect work to be able to allow Job to be able to see everything in the perspective of trusting God. Prayer develops patience. Prayer causes us to think about God's will and to wait for His will to be revealed in whatever situation that we might be. What is your request today? What is it that you're asking God? And are you asking patiently, prepared to see that God may say yes or no or wait? He might substitute, and He might just say you need to continue to change during this process of learning His will. Elijah was a man like us, according to James 5:17 and 18. He had a nature like ours, and that's comforting to me because Elijah, though he was a great prophet, he was subject to ups and downs. Elijah was subject to doubts, disappointments, discouragement, even depression. And so if Elijah could experience those kinds of things, then it kind of lets me feel like that I'm really not too far off. Maybe I'm normal with a nature like most of you. And so during this time, we need to make sure that our prayers, like Elijah's prayers, he prayed for rain. For 3.5 years, there was no rain. And Elijah prayed, and then the rain came from heaven, and the land became plentiful. Elijah is a great example of patience in prayer. Someone had said that I had 1,000 questions for God until I met Him. May we get to know God during this time of stillness, during this time of quietness and isolation. May we learn to grow in patience as we wait for God's answer. Until the next time, continue to pray, continue to study, be safe, be healthy, and may God bless you. See you again later.